Regarding Seasteading, the whole purpose of it, as you said, is to create competitive governments as well as to experiment with government, so we can finally prove what is the best social structure for people to live in, and if there's a one-size-fits-all society itself, or if we have to have many different kinds of governments.
Yeah. And, before we go any further, I want to ask you really quick, and so our listeners, hear it out. Where are some of the websites we can find more information on this and everything like that? You have a website?
All right. Well, the best website to find information is the seasteadinstitute.com.org. Sorry about that. And the other thing is, if you're interested in the current seastead looking to be built within the next 2 years outside of San Francisco, it will be bluesea.com, which will be an office building which has a goal of holding 1,000 people on it who cannot get visas into the U.S. who want to get into the Silicon Valley tech industry.
Yeah, great. That's some of the information I think a lot of people would like to know for the website and all. Well, me and Mark here, we're discussing this, and we were referring back to that famous movie, and that was with Kevin Krosnak and his movie about Waterworld. Right when this whole idea comes out.
Horrible movie.
You don't like it?
Horrible movie.
You don't like it?
Well, from a look at Seastead and so on, I think it's pretty cool. But in terms of storyline and acting abilities in it, I think it lacks it lacks a certain thing. If anyone would like to watch a documentary on the Seastead Institute, though, there's a documentary you can probably get it on YouTube. I'm hoping they haven't taken down. I don't think they have. Called "The Sea is a Harsh Mistress." And that'll give a lot of information away on what Seastead is, or they can just Google Seastead Institute or YouTube Seastead Institute, and they'll get speeches from Patrick Friedman, commercials on Seastead, and even some of my own videos out.
And look, the thing is, why I brought up Waterworld is that they had their own little islands in that movie as well. Maybe not the best looking islands, but they had it, that group of homeless people. They built up their own little dirt island, and they got run over by the smokers and blown up. That was sad. But the thing is that when I think of that, I'm thinking of seasteading. And I saw a couple of I was watching them when I was a little bit younger and a little bit stuff, and I thought it was impossible. But now I'm seeing that this movement's being more respected since more and more effort's being put into it, and having more and more exposure and taken more seriously.
Well, I recently handled a booth at something called the Singularity Summit with speakers ranging from the founder of Skype to the founder of PayPal to scientists from MIT. I ran a booth there for Seasteading and talked to a lot of people, and Seasteading was never invited there before. We got invited this year, and we were treated as a well-respected idea. People, I handed the brochures to people, I spoke to people, and they said, we love you guys. So I think we've definitely moved a long way. And to the notion of Waterworld and these things being attacked, why would they want to attack us is the real question, and that's sort of why I think it's more of childish imagination than anything else.
Yeah. But I'm looking at some of these pictures. They have wonderful graphics, and it's really displaying what it would look like. How much would one of these islands maybe cost to make?
Well,
a lot.
Of course, a lot. You have to realize that the original ones, the first ones we're going to start doing, which will be built during this decade, and Blue Sea is going to be the first of those. They're just going to be cruise ships, basically the cruise ships and large boats, basically morphed into a position that people will live there. Like they won't even require many changes. And then when this becomes a more popular idea and we get tens of thousands of people living there, we'll move into these larger ones, and the money will come for that from private investment and so on. So I think that so those big ones, the really nice ones, those are still a while away. But by a while, it's the 20s, the 30s. It's not that long from now.
Yeah, because it looks. I'm looking at some of the numbers here, and some say that it's estimated for one of the first ships that some of them call different names here, $10 million. But I'm guessing all the efforts are be placed into it, and as time progresses and this gets more and more respect, that I don't think it'll be that hard to obtain this amount of money.
Well,
it sounds like a very, very, very realistic idea. But here's another thing that has been brought up. And Mark, you can jump in at any time to ask a couple of questions if you like. The thing is that when me and Mark were discussing this, we were thinking of, how would political discourse, and diplomatic relations between, let's say, an island like this and another island and an island and a land-based nation work? Like,
well, all right.
Can you explain that type of how would it work? Future diplomatic relations between little smaller islands and greater nations?
All right, well, I'm going to use the first one, Blue Sea, as basically how government will relate to that. Blue Sea is supposed to be 1,000 people living 12 miles outside of San Francisco on a seastead, and it'll be an office building for people who couldn't get visas. These people aren't collecting any government revenue, and they're only providing jobs to the people in San Francisco, because most of the goods they'll be getting are going to be imported from San Francisco and probably some other places. So they'll be creating jobs. They won't be sucking up any welfare benefits, and these people likely would be poor or not able to succeed in their other countries. So any politician in the U.S. that's willing to pass up such a great opportunity for their state and ruin the lives of 1,000 people, I think they'll have a little voter problem.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it definitely. To mess up that whole life on an island, piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, the one thing I think we'll have to worry about regarding getting governments is the only thing is really pollution, because really we're a benefit to any government we're near just because we're going to be a large buyer and importer of goods from them. So I would think they'd want us there, as long as we can keep it clean. Which, looking at some of the science to this, the environmental aspects of it are pretty positive.
Mm-hmm. And now, Mark, you were trying to ask a question there, yeah.
Yeah, these individual seasteads, since they're funded by investors and, people come for their own interests, if the government, or if there is a government, or the people, who are in charge, if it was going downhill, if people weren't being treated correctly, their liberties were being infringed upon, would they be able to leave? Would it function a little bit like a business where people have to, the owners, if there are any, of the island are accountable to the citizens there?
Well, I'm going to quote our biggest backer, Peter Thiel, the PayPal founder, who's donated 70% of what the Seastead Institute has to us, and he said in his interview for Reason magazine, the worst thing a government could do is tell their people they can't leave. And that's what Germany did. Germany did under Hitler, where you could only leave if you were over the age of 65. So without question, you will be able to leave if you no longer wish to stay in a seastead. So that's obvious. We're going to have no immigration laws.
Well, I have a question. What will happen is if maybe one little island decides, what? Screw the rest of the islands. This is what we're going to do. Nobody's allowed to leave. Nobody's allowed to have this. Nobody's allowed to have that. Who would step in? Would anyone step in?
Well, I'm sure they'll be precautious to do that. But the thing is, these are businesses. So why would a seastead want to stop at 1,000 people? I mean, they want to grow like any business. They want to grow from 1,000 to 2,000 to 10,000 to 1,000,000. So by doing this and by making their people unhappy and by forcing them to stay, that's just going to cost them business down the road. And eventually those people will find a way out. And there'll probably be agreements done beforehand, ways of protection, and so on to avoid that from happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was expecting an answer. I have to play devil's advocate sometimes. You know what I mean? Yeah, it basically is like a business, and we were discussing this in the beginning of the show about one instance of one company going against the mainstream and what the consumers actually want, and I basically explained that if they do this, it'll make the consumers unhappy, they lose revenue, and they can fall apart. So they have a choice to make, whether to fall apart or whether to change their policy. So I guess it will be the same exact thing done to these islands, basically.
It's all in the invisible hands of the marketplace, really, in how a seastead will operate. Because the thing is, if Blue Seed was a failure, if Blue Seed said, you know what, we're going to tax these people, we're going to oppress these people, what's going to happen is those 1,000 people will move to the next seastead, or they just won't go to any seasteads, and Blue Seed will make no money. And I mean, the thing is, so that's really the feeling on this. I don't think oppression is a fear, really, and I think that governments will basically just change policies and shift them, whether it's in education, whether it's in technology, infrastructure. They're going to shift things around. It could be libertarian, it could be communist. I doubt it would be communist, but it could be many things. And from that, we're just going to have really going to have experimentation, which is the best thing, because right now, for a government to do anything, it's extremely difficult because there's debate, you don't know what's going on, and that's what we're looking to solve.
Mhm. Yeah.
So really, the best way to look at this, even if you're a libertarian, I've spoken to many libertarians who say, hey, I love what you're doing, I think it's great, I think it's going to help a lot of people, but I don't like the water, or I can deal with some government, I can't move to a seastead. They can say, well, look, this seastead, we built a city on water that had a few thousand people, and now it's worth billions of dollars. Why can't we just do that here, make our country libertarian? So that's another way we're going to benefit things.
Yeah. And, also, I'm looking at some other points about the seasteading. I don't know if you touched upon it, but where would be the limits in creating some of these islands, on these waves? Like, is there certain areas in which it will be allowed and certain areas in which won't be allowed? And, like, who would be the one deciding whether which areas permitted and prohibited to create one on?
Well, I'd say it all goes into the spirit of the entrepreneur, the spirit of the entrepreneur will likely listen to his engineers on that. Realistically, how wavy can it get? That's a little tough to tell on how much you can take. You have to realize that whenever there's a huge storm coming, you can just basically because these seasteads are floating cities, you can actually move them away from the hurricane in pretty good time, or you can. So that's one thing, and it's another way we're going to create jobs for people in San Francisco, because we can say, hey, can we pay rent for us to use the bay, so we can be safe for this hurricane or whatever's coming through. So that's pretty much the plan right there.
Yeah. So that would be pretty cool, and you're right that it will create jobs, because like you said, when the hurricane comes down, maybe the first time something bad happens, hopefully not, but if something does, they'll learn and say, well, some person will come along and say, well, look, this is my solution to you, and it's going to make your life easier. Well, this is the new thing, to move this thing 6 miles down.
Another thing this would do is it'll create innovation by unlocking human potential from this. I was reading an article about New Zealand recently. Everything in New Zealand is going fine. Infrastructure's there. Everything's there, and yet they're still going down in global rankings on where they place as a nation. And if you look at that, that's due to the fact they're having a decrease in innovation. So unlocking the human potential for people who came from countries where they had no education, they had no hopes or anything, and giving them the power of the free market and education, that can make it so they can innovate and prosper, and that'll benefit the entire world.